The sun beat down over the endless sea of sand as the forward operating base shimmered beneath the haze of heat rising off steel and concrete. The air tasted of dust oil and static tension that never quite settled even when the sky seemed calm. And Blue, the commander of the base, Colonel Mason Hale, had learned long ago that silence in the desert never meant peace. It meant something was moving somewhere unseen and waiting. The new rotation had arrived 3 days earlier, a supply transport, bringing fuel rations and replacement personnel, among them a quiet woman with a case marked Communications Calibration Specialist Elena Ward. Her name had barely registered in his mind as he scanned through deployment sheets, but he had noticed the way she carried herself, balanced, grounded, like someone who measured distance by instinct. She said little during orientation, her words clipped and efficient, her eyes drifting toward the perimeter towers and ridge lines rather than the screens, and signal equipment she was supposed to manage when the other technicians joked about the heat or the food she offered. Only a thin nod, and returned to her work, moving with a calm rhythm that made the others nervous. It was not arrogance, it was composure, the kind that came from a different world, one where hesitation cost lives. The commander watched her once from the edge of the hangar as she adjusted a satellite link. Her fingers tracing wires with deliberate precision, she looked less like someone tuning a system and more like someone sighting a target. The desert night came fast in that region, the stars burning cold over the black expanse of dunes and twisted metal barriers. Hale stood near the operations tent reading the latest patrol reports when he saw her again standing alone on the Southern Watch platform. Her silhouette still against the floodlight glow, she seemed to be listening to something, not the hum of generators or the wind, but the space between them. He walked up quietly, curious, and spoke her name. She turned without surprise, as if she had already known he was there. She told him she was recalibrating motion sensors. The readings had been inconsistent since the last sandstorm. He nodded, but her tone had none of the distracted chatter of tech staff. It carried authority, precision, and something older, like the tone of someone who had once given orders, not taken them. By the third day, Elena had become a background ghost. She was there when needed, silent. When not, her workspace spotless, her reports accurate beyond standard protocol. The soldiers started calling her the Ghost Tech, half in jest, half in unease. One corporal swore he saw her near the sniper range before dawn, standing by the berm, watching. The horizon, she had no reason to be there. No clearance for weapons, but he said the way she stood reminded him of the training instructors from Special Forces long before sunrise. The air sharp and dry, carrying the smell of sand and oil. She was gone before anyone could ask. That afternoon, the radio crackled with static, an approaching convoy sending an urgent message. They were 2 clicks out from the ridgeline, and under potential surveillance, the commander ordered elevated watch, but dismissed the alert as routine smugglers or false signals. Yet when the convoy failed to respond 10 minutes later, something in his gut turned heavy. He stepped into the control room where technicians scrambled to clear frequencies, the air electric with stress and white noise. Elena stood by the monitor, her eyes locked on the signal trace. Her hand hovered over the keyboard as though calculating something unseen. Hale ordered her to stay clear until the comms were verified, but she didn't move. Instead, she adjusted the feed, manually bypassing the usual diagnostic tools, her movements deliberate and smooth. The room went quiet when the signal sharpened into faint visuals, 3 vehicles stalled on a dusty road, and shadows flickering from. Higher ground gunfire erupted over the comm channel static, and shouting blending into chaos. Hale barked for his rapid response team, but before he could finish the order, Elena spoke, her voice calm and clear, advising him to redirect the drones 20 degrees north by 100 meters. He froze. The instruction wasn't random. It was tactical. He gave the order hesitantly. The drones shifted and the camera feed aligned, revealing a second ambush position hidden behind the ridge line. Her timing had saved the convoy from a complete wipeout. The commander turned to question her, but she was already analyzing wind and distance numbers scribbled on a scrap of paper. Not the digital grid she was supposed to use when the attack finally ceased, and the rescue team returned. Hale found Elena alone in the drone bay. Her sleeves rolled up her hands, methodically cleaning dust from the sensor lenses. She did not look up as he approached. He demanded to know how she knew the second ambush position existed. She replied quietly that sometimes patterns speak louder than people, then resumed her work as if nothing had happened. He pressed harder, asking about her previous postings, but she only said she had worked support for multiple field units. He could tell she was lying, or at least omitting something, her expression unreadable, but her eyes filled with something like sorrow or memory. Night fell again, bringing with it a stillness that felt unnatural. The wind had stopped, and even the hum of generators seemed muted. Hale sat in his quarters replaying the drone footage, frame by frame on his tablet, zooming in on the precision of the adjustments. Elena had made every correction perfect, every timing flawless, not a single hesitation. He had seen elite marksmen take similar measured pauses before taking a shot. Something about it gnawed at him. Her file listed her as a civilian contractor certified in systems diagnostics, but there were redactions, lines of text blacked out entire, sections missing. He tried to access deeper clearance, but the network denied him code locked at the highest level, reserved for operations he had never even heard of. Sometime past midnight, alarms blared through the camp motion sensors, triggering. From the northern perimeter, Hale grabbed his rifle and sprinted to the command post, soldiers shouting over one another as spotlights swept the dunes, searching for movement. The sensors flickered, then steadied, showing nothing, no heat, no trace. He ordered the area secured. But before his words finished echoing, Elena appeared at the edge of the room, already at the monitors. Her expression calm, her hand tracing the sensor graph. She muttered softly. Something about a shifting thermal layer interference. From wind currents, or perhaps something else, he asked her to explain. She said it was nothing, but her tone betrayed a flicker of concern. For the next hour, the base returned to uneasy, quiet soldiers whispering about ghosts or hidden scouts. Hale tried to focus on the patrol rotation schedule, but his thoughts kept circling back to the technician who had walked through fire with the calm of a surgeon. She was an enigma wrapped in protocol, yet the more he tried to place her, the more invisible she became. It was as if she existed in the seams between identities, her posture, her habits, even the way she looked at her surroundings, every action deliberate, like she was waiting for something to break the silence. At dawn, she stood again on the same platform, the one overlooking the barren valley beyond the wire. The light broke over the horizon, painting her face, gold through the dust. She raised her hand, shading her eyes, not in awe, but calculation. Hale watched from below, unseen, as she scanned the horizon slowly, methodically. He realized she wasn't admiring the sunrise. She was measuring angles, distances, wind direction. She was mapping a battlefield that didn't yet exist. He felt a chill. Despite the heat, a call came through. The radio breaking his thought, a supply truck delayed by a landslide near Sector Delta, routine by every measure. Yet when he looked up again, she was gone. Her station empty, her tools neatly arranged as though she had simply stepped out for air. But the security feed showed nothing, no sign of movement, no exit log. He ordered the guards to check the outer gate, but they found no footprints, no vehicle tracks. The desert swallowed her presence like it had never been there by the time the sun reached its peak. The commander received a message from the delayed convoy. They were moving again. No casualties, no interference. Everything clear. Hale exhaled, trying to shake the unease. But deep down, something told him the quiet was deceptive. Something had happened out there, something tied to her absence. He replayed the feed one more time, slowing the frames until a glint of light appeared far on the horizon, a reflection perhaps, or something else. He leaned closer, heart pounding, trying to determine, if it was coincidence or intention, and then the feed went black. The wind howled across the barren ridges like the whisper of ghosts carrying sand that bit into skin and metal alike. The night sky glowed faintly with the reflection of distant flares. From patrols scattered miles apart, the base pulsed with quiet tension as Colonel Hale leaned over the operations map. His eyes tracing the thin blue lines marking the patrol route through the western valley, a dangerous stretch of rock and emptiness, where signals faded without reason. The radio had gone silent an hour earlier. One of his patrol team's call sign Delta 6 had missed 2 check-ins. The silence felt heavy, unnatural. It was the kind that crawled under his skin and told him something had gone wrong out there. Technicians scrambled across consoles, adjusting frequencies, rerouting antennas, and refreshing satellite feeds. The static hiss grew louder, filling the command room like an unseen presence. Hale tried to mask his frustration, barking orders to boost transmission power and widen the thermal scans, but every attempt ended in blank screens and dead air. His gut twisted tighter. The desert did not forgive mistakes, and silence meant only one of 2 things: either a storm or a trap forming beyond their reach, and there was no storm tonight, in the corner of the room. Elena stood motionless, her eyes on the screens, not the officers. Around her, her posture unchanged since the first alarm, her hands clasped loosely behind her back. She seemed to be listening not to the static, but through it. Hale noticed and called to her, asking if she had found anything. She turned her head slightly and said the interference was not natural. Something was blocking the signal deliberately. He frowned, asking if it was enemy jamming. She nodded once, but added that the pattern was strange, not consistent with known frequencies. It pulsed in rhythm. Like a heartbeat, faint and methodical, he asked how she could tell, and she replied that she had seen this kind of interference once before, though she did not say where. Minutes stretched into an hour, still no contact from Delta 6. The temperature dropped sharply, the kind of chill that cut through armor and reason. The men on duty grew restless, whispering about ambushes and mines. Hale ordered the quick reaction force to prep vehicles. But before the order reached the motor pool, Elena spoke. Quietly saying it would be too late by the time they reached the valley, he demanded to know how she could be so sure, and she replied that the signals showed shifting thermal signatures near the canyon wall, which meant movement at ground level. Maybe an enemy unit setting a trap. Maybe something worse. Her tone carried certainty that came not from theory, but from experience. Hale hesitated, caught between logic and instinct, then asked her what she suggested. Elena looked at the live feed, one of the drone cameras flickering with static. She said there was still a narrow corridor where the signal had not been jammed. She could try to recalibrate the relay manually by taking a portable link to the western ridge. From there, she could locate Delta 6 and determine the interference source. Hale stared at her. The request was reckless. The ridge was exposed. No cover, no backup. He told her that was not her job, but she met his gaze with an expression that said she was not asking for permission, only informing him of what she would do. The commander felt something heavy settle in his chest. He wanted to refuse, but there was a quality in her calm that silenced him. He gave a curt nod and told her to take 1 soldier for protection. She simply said she would move faster alone. The desert swallowed her quickly, the faint glow of her headlamp vanishing behind the dunes. Hale stood at the watchtower, watching that light fade into nothingness. The base returned to a rhythm of waiting. Each minute dragging like an hour, he tried to occupy his mind with reports and system checks, but every sound, every flicker of static reminded him she was out there somewhere between silence and danger. The technicians spoke in low voices, some saying she would not make it back, others that she was not who she claimed to be miles away. Elena moved across the sand, her boots leaving shallow prints that vanished in seconds under the restless wind. She carried only a compact field kit slung. across her shoulder and a small transmitter unit. Her breathing steady, her eyes focused on the distant ridge. She moved with the precision of someone trained for movement under pressure, never hesitating, never rushing. Each step, measured, she reached the edge of the canyon and crouched. The land dropped sharply into darkness. The air cooler down below, she set the transmitter down and adjusted the frequency knobs, listening to the soft rise and fall of static through the receiver. Then she caught it, faint but distinct, the rhythmic pulse she had detected earlier. It was closer now. She adjusted the gain, and the pulse sharpened into fragments of voice, distorted but real. It was Delta 6 calling for extraction. Her pulse quickened. She boosted the frequency again and locked the coordinates on her display. They were pinned between rock outcroppings, half a click from her position under sniper fire. She looked up, scanning the ridgeline through the faint moonlight, and caught a flash of movement. A muzzle glint. She froze, heart steady, calculating distance, wind, velocity, and angle. Her fingers moved unconsciously, as if aligning an invisible sight picture. She could sense the shot before it came. She rolled sideways as the bullet struck, the rock where her head had been, fragments slicing her cheek. She exhaled slowly, the way one does before a shot. She crawled higher to a vantage point, pulling a compact monocular from her kit. The lens revealed 2 heat signatures on the ridge opposite. Side snipers, maybe scouts. She reached into the transmitter unit, switching it to a different frequency. She sent a coded ping to the base. Hale saw it flash across his screen, a narrow-band pulse carrying encrypted coordinates. He shouted to his team to trace it, and within seconds the lost patrol's location appeared on the map. A surge of relief rushed through him, followed by dread. When he realized the ping came from the ridge itself, the same ridge that should have been out of reach, he grabbed, his headset demanding to know if anyone was on that channel, but all he heard was static back at the ridge. Elena steadied her breathing, the wind cutting across her face. She closed her eyes briefly. Focusing her senses, she could feel the terrain. Like a memory carved into her bones, the snipers across the ridge were patient, disciplined. They would not fire blindly. They were waiting for her to move. She removed a small case from her bag, revealing a folded weapon, not standard issue, not listed in any base inventory, a compact rifle with markings that read SEI Precision. The metal cold under her hands, she assembled it quickly. Every motion, silent fluid her fingers, remembering what her mind had tried to forget. She took a prone position, aligning the scope through the faint shimmer of heat distortion. Her finger brushed the trigger lightly, but she did not fire. Not yet. She waited, listening, counting the seconds between the wind gusts. Then one of the enemy shifted slightly, exposing a shoulder. The crack of her rifle split the air, sharp and final, in the command center. Hale heard it faint through the open channel, a single report that echoed through the static, then silence. He called her name through the comm, but received nothing. Only the hum of the desert. She had not returned. Her signal vanished again. The men around him exchanged uneasy glances. The feed still showed the patrol's coordinates, stationary, perhaps sheltering, but he could not confirm without visual contact. He ordered the quick reaction team to move immediately. This time he would not wait. He climbed into the lead vehicle himself. The engines roared to life, headlights slicing through the darkness as they sped toward the ridge, the radio crackling with fragmented bursts of interference. When they arrived, the scene was quiet, too quiet, the air thick with spent dust. The patrol huddled behind a rock formation, shaken but alive. They said a single shot had ended the attack from nowhere. One moment they were pinned. The next, the ridge above erupted in echo and silence. Hale climbed to the high ground, following a trail of disturbed sand and empty shell casings. At the top, he found the transmitter still humming, a faint green light blinking, and next, 2 footprints leading down the other side, no body, no blood. Only the soft indentation of a rifle stand pressed into the sand. He stared at it as the realization settled heavy in his chest. As they returned to base, the first hint of dawn began to touch the horizon, washing the desert in pale light. Hale sat in silence, replaying every moment. From the night, the sound of that single shot still ringing in his ears, he wanted to believe she was safe somewhere, walking back under the fading stars. But part of him knew she was something else entirely, something sent into their world for reasons beyond his clearance, and as he stepped into the control tent, the monitors flickered once more for a brief instant. A line of text appeared across the main screen, coordinates updating one final signal from the West Ridge before vanishing again, and the commander realized she was still out there moving through the silence, like a shadow waiting for the next signal, waiting for whatever came next. The base was restless by the time the sun climbed over the dunes, the air thick with heat and speculation. Soldiers whispered of what had happened in the valley the night before. They spoke of a single shot that had silenced the enemy and of the technician who had walked alone into the desert to bring the patrol back home. Colonel Hale said nothing. He stood near the command deck, his uniform dusted from the rescue mission, staring at the silent screens that once again flickered with static. Elena had not returned. No one had seen her since dawn. Yet something told him she was not gone. She was merely unseen, like the wind that shaped the dunes, but never stayed long enough to be traced. Hours later, the radio operator shouted a signal. Incoming faint but clear, Hale rushed forward. The display came to life, showing encrypted coordinates and a simple message patrol, safe coordinates verified. He felt his pulse quicken. Relief washing through the tension, he ordered a drone to verify the coordinates, and within minutes, the live feed showed Delta 6 alive, regrouped, and moving toward the base. The commander exhaled in disbelief. The signal came from an uplink station deep in the ridge, more than 3 kilometers from any friendly position. No vehicle tracks led there, no footprints on satellite imaging. Yet the transmission carried Elena's signature code. Hale stared at the screen, her name glowing at the corner of the feed like a ghost from the machine. When she finally returned, it was without sound or announcement. The guards at the outer gate saw her first walking through the heat haze, her uniform streaked with dust, her hands steady, her expression unreadable. She carried a small data chip which she handed directly to the commander without a word. He inserted it into the console. The footage opened with thermal imaging from a ridgetop. The video captured the enemy snipers, their heat signatures flaring. Red against the cold rock, one by one, they vanished in perfect precision. The kill distances marked in digital timestamp, the final range reading 3,247 meters. Hale stared at the number, unsure if it was error or miracle she had done the impossible. A shot no one on record had ever made. He asked her how she managed it, what weapon she had used, but she simply said it was a borrowed tool, then turned away, heading for her quarters. Her calmness unnerved him. He wanted to question her press, her demand answers, but something in her demeanor warned him not to. He followed at a distance, watching her move like a shadow through the corridors. No triumph, no fear, only stillness. She entered her room and closed, the door leaving him alone in the narrow hallway filled with the low hum of generators. That night, Hale could not sleep. He sat at his desk, staring at the classified portion of her file that he had tried and failed to access, each attempt denied. By higher clearance than his own, her civilian contractor status was clearly false. The redacted text stretched across every line like black scars. Hiding truth, he considered sending an inquiry to command, but hesitated. Something deep inside told him that whatever she was hiding was sanctioned by people far above his pay grade, and that pulling the wrong thread could bring consequences he was not ready to face. He leaned back, listening to the hum of the bass, and wondered who Elena Ward really was. Outside, the desert shifted under moonlight, the dunes whispering in the wind. Soldiers on night watch saw her again, walking the perimeter alone, carrying no weapon, her silhouette calm against the horizon. One private swore he saw her stop, kneel and press her hand against the sand, as if feeling for something beneath. When he blinked, she was gone, leaving only the empty stretch of desert glimmering under the stars. Hale heard the report and felt that same pull of unease. She was not ordinary. She was a weapon disguised as a whisper. Morning brought orders from Central Command, encrypted and brief: maintain operational silence. No further inquiries into classified contractors. Hale read the message twice, feeling the warning behind the words. He folded the note and burned it in the metal bin outside his quarters. But the unease only grew every time he saw her walking through the base. The soldiers stepped aside instinctively, as though sensing something in her presence that demanded distance. She spent hours in the drone bay recalibrating sensors, though no one asked her to. Her eyes always distant, as if she were watching a battle that had not yet begun. On the third evening, the wind rose strong and sharp, carrying the scent of dust and ozone. Hale stood at the observation platform, scanning the horizon. He found her there again, standing at the same place she had been that first night. Her gaze fixed on the western ridges. He approached slowly, his boots crunching over gravel, and asked her what she was looking for. She said she was listening. He asked to what. She replied, to the desert. It always warns before it strikes, then fell silent. The wind carried her hair across her face, the fading light painting her. In shadow, she turned to him, and for the first time her eyes seemed almost human, filled with exhaustion and something like regret. She said there would be another attack soon. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon, the kind that ends everything. Then she walked away, leaving him standing alone with the cold wind curling around his collar. Later that night, Hale sat in the dim light of the command room, re-watching the footage from the ridge. The thermal images burned into his mind. One shot, one kill. Precision beyond logic. He slowed the video to frame by frame and caught something in the reflection of the lens, a symbol etched onto the barrel of her weapon, SEI Precision, a name whispered in rumors among special units, a weapons division that officially did not exist. He paused the frame, the logo glowing faintly, then fading into static. His heartbeat heavy in his ears. He looked toward the doorway, half expecting her to appear and explain. But the corridor remained empty, only the distant hum of generators filled the air, and somewhere outside, beyond the perimeter, the wind carried a low rumble like thunder. Though the sky was clear, Hale stared into the darkness, knowing deep inside that the next storm was already forming, and that, when it broke, she would be at the center of it, unseen, unheard, and unstoppable. And then the alarms began to sound again. The alarms cut through the night like the cry of a wounded animal, sharp, relentless, echoing across the base, the red lights flashing against walls and tents, painting everything in the color of blood. Colonel Hale burst from his quarters, half-dressed. Boots unlaced, his voice hoarse from shouting orders as soldiers scrambled for rifles and body armor. The sound of engines roared. To life, the air thick with sand, kicked up by vehicles rushing toward defensive positions. He ran to the command post, the monitors alive with movement thermal images lighting up across the western ridge, the same ridge where Elena had made her impossible. Shot, they were under attack again. Only this time, the enemy came prepared. Missile trails sliced through the sky, leaving white scars in the darkness. One slammed into the outer perimeter, sending shockwaves that rattled the walls. Hale grabbed the radio, barking for counterfire positions to return volleys, but the response came garbled, then silent. The interference was back stronger than before, like invisible hands crushing every signal. He felt his stomach twist the pattern, the pulsing static, the faint rhythmic beat. It was the same as before, but multiplied. Someone was coordinating this from distance, someone who knew their weakness. He turned to the technicians, demanding a solution, but their faces were pale, their equipment useless. Looked up and saw her standing in the corner. Elena was calm as ever, her face illuminated by the flicker of warning lights. She said quietly that they would not win this fight with artillery. The enemy was using spotters, hidden along the far ridge. Controlling their fire with laser markers, she could hear the faint clicks through the static of the sensors like distant whispers. He asked her how she knew, she said, because she had used the same technique once, and that it always ended with precision. Strikes. Hale stared at her realization dawning like lightning. She was no technician, never had been. She was the one who knew how to find and end such threats, because she had been the threat once herself. Before he could speak, she was already moving. Through the chaos, heading for the armory guards tried to stop her, but one look from her froze them in place. She opened a heavy black case resting on the rack. Its surface marked with faded letters, SEI Precision. Inside lay a Barrett M82A1 rifle, modified, sleek, and deadly. The metal gleamed under the red emergency light. She lifted it with the ease of familiarity, attaching a long suppressor and custom scope. Her movements precise like a ritual. The commander followed her, trying to protest. That the ridge was too far, that the enemy had the high ground. She said softly, "Distance is not the enemy." Ignorance is then stepped past him, heading to the tower stairs. The wind outside howled fierce, tearing at the flags and tarps the air filled. With the distant thud of mortars, Hale climbed after her, his chest tight, his voice barely reaching her over the noise. She did not turn when he called her name. At the top, she knelt near the railing, setting the rifle down on a makeshift bipod. She checked the scope, dialed in corrections, adjusted for wind, and dropped her calm, unnerving. Amidst the chaos, the commander crouched beside her, seeing through the lens the flicker of movement along the far ridge, faint dots of light pulsing with deadly rhythm. She whispered, "Those are the spotters. If they live, we die then." Without hesitation, she took a slow breath and fired. The shot cracked through the night, the recoil thundering against the steel floor, the tracer streaking across 3 kilometers of emptiness before striking its mark. One light vanished, then another, her breathing steady, each motion seamless. Hale watched in awe as her bullets found targets unseen by the naked eye. The attacks on the base faltered, the artillery fire growing, erratic then halting. But the victory was not complete, for a new flash appeared higher up the ridge, a scope glint reflecting moonlight. She froze, recognizing the pattern. The enemy sniper was scanning for her position. Hale saw it too, the reflection. Shifting closer, he grabbed her shoulder, urging her to move, but she shook her head, saying, "Not yet. If I move, he wins." The silence stretched long and thin like a blade. Then the sniper fired. The round whistled past, tearing through a metal beam, showering them in sparks. She exhaled, lowered her heartbeat, and returned the shot. The recoil hammering through her arms, the rifle roared again and again, until finally the ridge fell quiet. Hale leaned over the railing, trying to confirm the kill. But the desert hid its secrets in shadow. He turned to her, his voice rough, asking who she really was. She looked at him for a long moment and said, "I was someone who learned too late what precision costs." Then stood, the wind blowing through her hair, her eyes reflecting, the distant fires still burning along the perimeter. Before Hale could speak again, the radio on his belt crackled faintly through the static. A single voice breaking through, male, confident, speaking in a language he did not know. Elena's expression changed, her calm replaced by something sharp. She snatched the radio, listened for a few seconds, and said, "They are not retreating, they are regrouping. Their commander is still alive, and he is calling for heavy reinforcements." Hale asked how she could understand the transmission. She replied without hesitation, "Because I trained with them once years ago before I vanished into silence." He stared, stunned. She turned toward the dark horizon, her hand gripping the rifle tighter. Her voice low and certain, "They will come for me, because they already know who I am. The sky flashed again, the first shell of a new bombardment screaming overhead, the ground trembling under impact. She slung the rifle across her back and told him to hold the command post. No matter what happens, do not follow me. He demanded to know where she was going. She said to end what I started long ago, then disappeared down the stairs, leaving him standing. In the flickering red light, the air filled with the echo of distant thunder. Her words circling in his mind, the truth now undeniable. The technician he had welcomed to his base was a ghost from wars fought in shadows, and her battle was not finished outside. The desert trembled as enemy engines roared in the distance, and Hale felt it in his bones that this night would not end like the others. The desert was silent again, but not peaceful. Smoke curled into the pale morning sky, rising from the shattered perimeter of the base. The wind had gone still, and that stillness made every sound feel louder. The soft crack of burning fuel, the metallic groan of distant towers, the faint rhythm of boots rushing through dust. Colonel Hale stood on the roof of the command post, his eyes searching the horizon for movement. But there was none. Elena was gone. She had left before dawn, her steps light and deliberate, walking toward the far ridge where the enemy commander had set up his final nest. The base scanners showed artillery trucks and communication uplinks stationed across the mountains, far beyond conventional rifle range. It was a death zone, open, bright, exposed. And yet that was where she was headed, rifle slung across her back, expression unreadable. Hale had tried to stop her. He had shouted across the comms, ordered her to turn back, demanded to know who she really was. Her reply was a whisper that carried a strange sadness. Someone who made a promise too long ago to break now. Then the line went silent. The sun climbed slowly over the dunes, lighting the battlefield in gold and crimson. Each step she took felt heavier than the last. Her mind drifted to years she had buried, a time when she had worn the same uniform as those now hunting her. Back then, she had been part of a covert division, trained to strike from distances that defied physics. Precision was worshipped. Emotion was weakness. Every shot was a vow, clean, perfect, and detached. But it was detachment that had destroyed her. One mission, one shot too many, one target that should never have been marked. She had walked away from that life, trading the name she'd been given for one that meant nothing. Elena Ward, the technician, the ghost who fixed machines, the woman who didn't kill anymore. And now the past had found her again. She climbed the final slope, breath steady, body moving as though on memory alone. When she reached the crest, she dropped to her knees, unstrapped the rifle, and assembled it in silence. Each piece slid into place like a ritual, the scope locking with a soft click, the magazine seating with finality. Her fingers trembled only once when she touched the trigger guard. She let her hand rest there a moment, feeling the cold weight of it. Through the scope, the world narrowed to a circle of clarity. The enemy encampment lay below, trucks, radar dishes, soldiers moving with precision and discipline. And in the center, standing beside a long-range transmitter, the enemy commander. He was calm, confident, unaware that he was being watched from more than 3 kilometers away. Elena adjusted the focus, reading wind direction through the faint shimmer of heat rising from the sand. Distance, 3,247 meters. Beyond regulation, beyond record, but not beyond her. She had done it before, once, long ago, when she still believed that precision was purpose. Now she hesitated. Her pulse echoed in her ears, slow and heavy. She could feel her heart arguing with her training. He was an enemy. That was fact. He would bring fire down on the base, kill everyone she had protected. But she also knew that if she pulled the trigger again, she would never escape the person she used to be. There would be no Elena Ward. No technician, no redemption, only the sniper whose name was erased for a reason. The wind shifted, soft and cold. She inhaled, exhaled, and the breath shook her chest. One more shot, she thought. Just one, and it ends. She looked up from the scope and glanced at the horizon. The base was a faint shape in the distance, a glimmer of life in the vast emptiness. Somewhere down there, Hale was watching, waiting, trusting her with everything. It had been a long time since anyone had trusted her. She closed her eyes briefly and let that feeling sink in. When she looked again through the scope, the commander, below, turned slightly, a gesture almost human, almost curious. Maybe he sensed her, maybe not. The distance between them was more than physical. It was everything she had been running from. Her finger tightened on the trigger, then froze. If I take the shot, I go back. The voice in her head was calm, familiar, her old instructor's voice. The one that had told her there was no morality in math, only trajectory. She wanted to scream, to tell that ghost that she was done with it, that she was not a weapon anymore. But the memory wouldn't fade. She could see the faces of those she had lost, the innocents caught in Precision's shadow. And then she heard it. Faint through the wind, Hale's voice on the open channel. Ward, if you can hear me, do what you have to. We'll be here. It wasn't an order. It was permission. And somehow that made it harder. Her heartbeat slowed. Her breathing steadied. She aligned the crosshairs with the commander's chest, then adjusted slightly higher to compensate for distance. Time seemed to stretch, each second turning infinite. She could feel every grain of sand beneath her, every vibration of the earth. When she pulled the trigger, the sound wasn't loud. It was clean, sharp, final. The recoil pressed into her shoulder like a heartbeat. Through the scope, she saw the target fall. A small collapse in the distance, almost graceful. The radio interference cut out instantly. Silence followed, deep and endless. She lowered the rifle slowly, staring at it like it was something she didn't recognize. Her hands were shaking now. The shot had ended the battle, but it had also ended her illusion of peace. The base would survive, but the woman she had become would not. She knew that as surely as she knew the trajectory of a bullet. She sat there for a long time, the desert quiet around her. Then she dismantled the rifle piece by piece, placing it back into the case. When she was done, she buried it under the sand, marking the spot with a single stone. By the time Hale reached the ridge with a recovery team, she was gone. No tracks, no signs of movement, only the soft indentation where she had lain and the faint mark of a single stone gleaming under the sun. He stood there, the wind tugging, at his uniform, and realized he would never know who she really was. Only that she had saved them all. Only that somewhere in the silence of the desert, a ghost had found a measure of peace. Not through victory, but through the price of one last perfect shot. And as the wind carried the echo of that shot across the valley, it sounded less like war and more like a goodbye.